and welcome to Talking F1. We're a podcast from Grand Prix Grandstand that does pretty much that. We talk about F1. More specifically, we talk about Formula 1, Formula 2, Formula 3 and the W Series. I'm your host Jim Kimberley, and today joining me we've got Thiemo Albers-Daly. How are you, Thiemo?
Not too bad, thank you. How about yourself?
Yes, not too bad, not too bad. And we've also got Jacob Phillips. How are you, Jacob?
Yeah, good morning, Jim. Yeah, I'm doing really well today, thank you.
Great to hear it. And both of you surviving after yesterday's race. It's back to Portugal for the second year in a row, back to Portimão for the second year in a row. And in my opinion, it kind of showed us its true colours of a circuit, because last year, excellent, Thiemo. This year, okay, fine, adequate.
More of a strategy race rather than an action-packed race, wasn't it? So I love the track, but the racing just wasn't quite up to 2020 standards.
Up to 2020 standards. And of course, last year was a bit of greasy at the start, Jacob. And this year, bone dry, blue skies, high temperatures. And yeah, I think, Thiemo, you called it right. It's a strategy race with undercuts and different tyre strategies. Jacob, how did you view it?
Do you know what? I thought it was okay. Compared it to the first two races, obviously Bahrain and Imola, absolute barnstormer. So I kind of thought, you know what, off the back of those, it's probably not going to be as good. But I enjoyed the strategy elements of it. It was a classic for me, 6 out of 10. It was nice to see actually some fighting at the front. Obviously, had some overtakes between Hamilton and Verstappen got Bottas back. But down the field, I was expecting a bit more from the midfield. There wasn't that much action. There was no real retirement issues or anything. So yeah, it was a standard sort of middle of the road race for me, to be fair.
Yeah, middle of the road, I think, is the kind of the right term. That I was thinking about this. There's a lovely expression I remember hearing before, that Formula One's a sport when anything can happen, and it usually doesn't. And this was not the epitome of it. That was Abu Dhabi last year, which featured, well, there were overtakes, but it just wasn't particularly exciting. For me, it was a race with overtakes for the lead, but nothing really too surprising. The only surprise I thought worthy of note was Alpine seemed to have a bit of pace. That was quite nice to see, that the midfield's growing a little bit more. They've been very much out of the points all season so far, only 3 races in. But apart from that, yeah, we know Hamilton's good, we know Verstappen's good, we know Mercedes is going to catch up on Red Bull, and I'm thinking, Thiemo, that they've possibly already surpassed them only 3 races in.
I wouldn't necessarily jump the gun on that one just yet, because I think Red Bull still have a good fighting chance, especially Perez seems to be, from judging from yesterday's performance, seeming to be back up there where he needs to be. So if he can continue like that, it was a bit of an unremarkable race in some respects for him, but he did a solid result in the end and did what Red Bull needed him to do in terms of putting pressure on Mercedes. So if he can keep building on that, then I don't think it's game over just yet. But going back to the quality of the race, I think maybe we've just got our expectations a bit too high because we were treated to 2 very good ones at the start. So I wonder if we'd received that as the first race of the season, if we'd be complaining, but you never know with these things, do you?
Yeah, I think Australia, when it's usually the season opener, always sets expectations very middle of the road, doesn't it? It's never usually excellent at Albert Park, but yeah, Bahrain, I think it's a really good place to start the season, actually, based on its 3 races in about 5 months recently. They've all been pretty damn good.
We need a break from Bahrain now. It's too much.
Yeah, we do.
You watch Sakir will pop up at the end of the season. You watch.
I wouldn't complain, I thought the Sakir Grand Prix was excellent, but I don't know if that's the George Russell cameo or what. But Jacob, do you think Red Bull still in the fight? It's still Max Verstappen versus Hamilton, or have Mercedes caught up?
Yeah, I'm definitely with Thiemo on this one. I feel that, this weekend I've seen loads of people on Twitter saying, oh, that's it, Mercedes are going to run off with it. But people forget, without that deleted lap time, Max would have been on pole. He had the fastest lap time deleted yesterday for track limits, which, is a Max issue. He needs to sort that out. But it might have just been track specific as well. Maybe the Red Bull doesn't like the wind, for example. So I think we need a few more races to kind of decipher whether Mercedes have made that, clear step ahead of Red Bull. So give it a couple more races. But I do feel, it's between those two again. Bottas showed, he put it on pole, but in the race, he really wasn't anywhere. So, yeah, it's between those two, but don't write it off just yet, is what I'll say.
I think something worth a note as well is that it was the first race weekend that Red Bull said they'd brought upgrades, and it didn't necessarily work out quite as strongly as they wanted it to. So I find that interesting as well.
Oh, you're very right. The upgrade path this season with the cost cap could be a key element, right? It's a different season for that, and we saw some of the comments made by Toto Wolff after the Russell and Bottas incident at Imola that's going to potentially impact them. So it could be that Mercedes, I think, undoubtedly have caught up because Red Bull were the faster car at the start of the season, and Mercedes had to completely out-strategize them. Or Red Bull had to shoot themselves in the foot, in my opinion, with Verstappen's call at Bahrain. This time round, it did look like Mercedes. I mean, just look at the Saturday. You mentioned the deleted lap times, but Mercedes had the pace on Saturday. I don't know if it necessarily translated so much into the race. However, they were on the Red Bull pace this weekend, and it's nice, to be honest, to see that sort of stuff. If we do go back to the era, 15 years ago, McLaren versus Ferrari or Ferrari versus Renault as it was back then, and some tracks suit these teams, some tracks suit these. I'll be really happy. I'd love to see Red Bull really fight back at Spain next week, then Mercedes to come back at Monaco and have that sort of back and forth, because then you start planning out the season, don't you, thinking, well, what's this track going to be like? Is Baku going to be useful? But let's go back to the start of the weekend, or in particular qualifying, and it wasn't a greatest, you talk about teams going forwards. Ricciardo and Stroll out in Q1. Everyone seemed to overlook Stroll, I think, because Aston Martin, Jacob haven't been there, haven't been at the races so far. But Ricciardo going out,
nowhere.
They really have. Ricciardo going out though, that was quite the shock.
Yeah, that was a huge shock. On the Friday, I kind of thought, McLaren were surprisingly not quite up there considering what they've been over the first two races. And it just showed to me again that, Ricciardo's not a one with that car yet. Norris has absolutely, destroyed him in the first two races. But, definitely for Ricciardo, he shouldn't be down there in P16. That car is a lot more capable than that. So that was a huge shock for me, yes.
Yeah. Thiemo, what do you think in that Aston Martin are going to get their act together? Or do you think this rake issue that they've got has screwed them up the entire season now?
I think it's going to mess with them for a bit while longer, at least. Because, I mean, it's the awkward thing of the rake is the issue, but then for whatever reason, Stroll had the issue this weekend and not Vettel. But then again, it's the awkward thing with qualifying. As much as I enjoy watching the qualifying, come the race, you see the likes of Vettel and Russell. It doesn't matter how good your lap time is in qualifying if your race pace isn't there. So I feel Aston Martin in particular are quite in a pickle, because they're going to be just fighting to get back to the maybe middle of the midfield at best, which after what they were doing last year is not where they want to be. But I think it's just the regulations have got them a bit, and it might be a long season for them.
Yeah, really wouldn't like to be in the board after seeing Drive to Survive, which I assume both of you have. I wouldn't like to be in the boardroom with Mr. Lawrence Stroll after their performances this season so far. But great segue, Thiemo. With Russell, almost made it into Q3. That would have been something. He could have slid back even further if he'd qualified in 10th place. But yeah, great shout from him, don't you think?
Yeah, it's good progress. I mean, it's you think about it from even just a couple of years ago to last year, where they were so happy to get into Q2. And then you had, Russell last time in complaining that he didn't get into Q3. And then this time being so close again, you think, if you could get that up to on the race pace as well, then we'd be laughing. But it's a good step for them making. It shows that the money is being spent in some of the right areas at least, and it's a good sign that we want to see them back up there. So it's a good step in the right direction, I think.
Just need to make that step onto Sundays as well, don't they? One team that did make a step up over the entire weekend, Alpine, Jacob, that was a pleasant surprise. We briefly mentioned it there, that they're going to be joining in on this midfield scrap, but Esteban Ocon got it into Q3, and then both of them bringing home points again, just on merit. No Kimi Raikkonen 30-second penalties this time. That's a real step forward, right?
Yeah, on a weekend where there was no real surprises on track, it was great to see that the surprise of the weekend was Alpine. They showed a bit of promise in Imola, but like you said, they got points through penalties, and the weather might have helped. It was a crazy race in Imola, so you can never be sure of true performance. But today, and going back over the weekend, Ocon especially, after having what I'd say was a mediocre 2020, he was certainly destroyed throughout the most of the season, I'd say, by Ricciardo. It was just great to see him up there on pace, and he's really starting to show his sort of 2018 Racing Point, or Force India as it was then, form. And it was also great to see Alonso, coming through the field from, I think, 13th in qualifying. And, I think Aston Martin and even AlphaTauri now might need to be careful, because, they've got up there in the points for 2 races in a row now. So it's gonna be great to see what sort of pans out over the next few races, and it's great to see another team in that midfield fight.
I think it's great that Ocon's woken up a bit, as you were saying, from last year, but the unfortunate thing for him is from this weekend, Alonso seems to have woken up as well, and that can't be good for him.
I'd love to see where the two of them would have finished, because Alonso just did show a lot more race pace. Ocon, he did what was needed, didn't he, on the Sunday, but he really pulled it forwards on Saturday, and I would be curious to see if Ocon was the one who qualified in 13th, if he could have made up those positions like Alonso did, but we never know. Races aren't won on Saturdays, but it certainly helps. So if Ocon can start in 7th or 8th place and stay there for the race duration and finish there, that's great. It's a lot easier than doing it from 13th like Alonso did. Talk about surprises, though. Not much in the way of surprises, but Hamilton is the champion, or the best qualifier. Hamilton's the best qualifier on the grid. He's going for 100 pole positions. But Thiemo, Bottas got pole this time round. That was quite a nice surprise, I thought. Actually seeing a proper shootout, 7,000ths of a second, I think it was, between the two of them.
You say proper shootout in the sense of the last qualifying run for all of the teams was a bit like cluster in some ways, because no one really improved on their times. But I know what you mean there. Yeah, it was nice to see someone other than Lewis or Max going on pole, but it's the unfortunate thing with Bottas. He performs on the Friday, he performs on the Saturday, but then again, when it counts on the Sunday, he doesn't quite have. He gave a bit more of a run for his money this time around, but it was getting poles one thing, staying there is quite another, and third place kind of shows that where he's at on that one. But again, it was nice to see at least the potential for a bit of that, and it made the race a bit more interesting up the front, as we were saying about earlier.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, if Bottas had, we really struggled last time out, didn't he, at Imola? If Bottas had another race like that, it would have been Max and Hamilton at the front, and I don't know if those overtakes that we saw for the lead would have happened. So it was good to see him fighting up there. Now, on the race, Jacob, Bottas got the jump. He kept first place, and I genuinely thought Hamilton alongside was going to be the person taking the lead on that first lap, but no. Bottas got away cleanly, as did most of the field, as did all of the field. And then on the subsequent circuit, it was Kimi Raikkonen in the most bizarre of accidents, which I haven't really seen a lot of people talk about. It was the only DNF of the weekend. He just seemed to pull alongside Giovinazzi and then run into the back of him. And
apparently he was checking something on his steering wheel coming out the final corner, and he was just double checking it as he was there, and then he just, Giovinazzi's there. He thought he had more space, and then boop.
That's a rookie error, surely. This guy's.
He took full responsibility and was quite surprised by himself. So I don't think he's too happy about it. Yeah, the most experienced driver on the grid. If
you take what the cardinal rule of Formula One is, don't take out your teammate. If he took out his teammate because he was checking something on his steering wheel, that would have been a hell of a.
Got lucky in some respects. There was just himself.
Yeah. Wasn't the best of things, but Jacob, Bottas on the restart, that was the best of things. He absolutely played the strategy ace and got Hamilton off his tail for laps on end. Obviously didn't work out come the end of the race, but in terms of his timing for that restart, he really, really gave it to Hamilton to have Verstappen passing him on that safety car restart.
Yeah, no, it was a fairly good restart. I thought that you know how Bottas sort of does these restarts. We saw in Mugello last year as well, and it's kind of quite dangerous actually. He'll back the pack up, and I think what he was trying to do, and maybe quite tactically actually, was sort of back Hamilton into Verstappen. It worked. So Verstappen got the jump therefore on Hamilton. So I think he was being really tactical, and therefore Hamilton was going to be more worried about Verstappen because let's be honest, that is the championship fight. So I think that that certainly helped him in that respect to gain that lead for what was the next few laps before eventually got overtaken.
Yeah, but do you see that one, Thiemo? I thought it was a bit of Bottas brilliance, which is unfortunately lesser spotted these days, but really, really dangerous potentially, like you say, Jacob, but it's a completely different track this time round. It's a big, long straight, and you don't want to be putting your foot down and giving the guys behind that slipstream for what's the best part of a kilometre down that straight.
No, I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing a bit more of that side of Bottas, actually. If he'd been doing that a bit more in the last couple of years, we might have had more of a championship fight in our hands, or at least maybe 2 or 3 drivers then. But it was good. It wasn't a team move, but at the same time, he's not there to be nice to Hamilton at this point. So that's fair enough. And it worked for a bit anyway and managed to give him a bit of an advantage. I did find it a little bit amusing when the commentary people were saying that it was reminiscent of, like Jacob was saying, of the Mugello thing. I was like, oh boy, here we go then. There's going to be a massive pile-up in a second. But luckily that wasn't the case. And he just managed to storm ahead and Max managed to fully capitalise on that, which is what we expect from him. So it was, for a situation where we're not always used to a lot going on at the front, it was a good catalyst to get a bit more action up there, which very much enjoyed that.
2 races in 3 now with Max and Lewis going side by side. It was Jacob, I thought, a really strong move from Max. It did show to me that sort of thing that Hamilton's not really been put under that much. It's like, I am going to push my way through and you are going to be subservient to my desires. And Hamilton's usually one dishing that out. So it's nice to see Max really taking the fight to him.
Yeah, it really was. And, I'm really hoping for a tight championship battle. So it was nice to see Max make that move, but I don't know what happened directly after that, because it looked like Max was then chasing down Bottas, and I believed that Max would get Bottas, but I don't know what happened. Did Max go wide in one corner? Because the gap wasn't that small, but then it went round the corner, and then Hamilton was right on Max's tail. So I'm not really sure what happened there. Did you see that, guys? I'm not sure.
Yeah, he went a bit wide from what I could tell. I think it was at T14 maybe. But yeah, on the latter part of the lap, of all places to run wide, because he did have those cornering speeds advantage and he just lost a little bit. Hamilton saw the possibility to take advantage, and Hamilton, been having the killer instinct that he's got, took full advantage of it. So I don't know if Verstappen could have kept ahead as Hamilton's tyres started fading, and we'll never know. But yeah, great to see these guys. It wasn't fighting for the lead at that point, although it was essentially fighting for the race victory. We just didn't know it at that point. But yeah, Hamilton, killer instinct, smelling a bit of blood in the water, saw Verstappen make the mistake and really, really went for it. Also, at the start, we saw Norris taking positions. That was key and really scuppered Perez's race by the fact he got ahead of, because Perez, Ocon and Sainz, Norris took in those opening laps, both before and after the safety car. And Thiemo, Norris, I think, is 3rd in the championship still at the moment. He really is the real deal, and it's really showing this year, in particular when you consider it against how Ricciardo's really struggling to adapt to this car. But Norris, best of the rest, surely.
Yeah, I mean, it's been great watching him since he got into F1, and now just that he's in his 3rd year, he's comfortable inside the car, he knows the team, he fits in there really well. And I mean, just going off the back of a podium last race, he just seems to be going from strength to strength, and he just is absolutely nailing everything and getting the absolute maximum out of the car. I think whilst Daniel didn't have the best weekend, obviously, I think it's still partly down to getting to know the car. I don't know how much longer we can say that for, but I can say it for the 3rd race. But Norris is just where it's at, and I think that's going to fuel some more motivation for Daniel, because if he can see that you can get that much out of the car, he's like, well, I want that as well. So I think that could be something that could come back later in the season and bubble up for a nice rivalry there. But for now, I just love the fact that Norris is ahead of Bottas in the championship. I mean, that's just, you wouldn't have thought that if you'd been told that before the season started, would you? So
that DNF for Bottas last time, of course, flattering Norris somewhat, but I don't think Norris's positioning in the championship at the moment, Jacob, is undeserved entirely. He really is the best of the rest right now. Or am I being too Norris waving here, waving the flag? But I think he really is showing that he's one of the better drivers in F1 that we've got right now.
No, he really is. And, okay, if you said after 3 races, he'd be ahead of Bottas, and not only Bottas, but Perez as well. But, Bottas had a DNF and, Norris hasn't. So, and also Perez had that, awful race in Imola. So, yeah, Norris is there on absolute merit. That podium was well-deserved in Imola. We got 4th on merit once again in Bahrain. And yesterday just showed that he is the best of the rest. That McLaren, for me, just doesn't have the pace to match the match the Red Bull ahead. So I don't think he was ever going to get Perez. And as the season goes on, unfortunately, Bottas and Perez will overtake him in the championship because, unfortunately, they just have the better cars. But I think, he will end up fifth in the championship come December.
That's a big stake in the ground. And I think, Jacob, we do need to go through your top fives at some point because you weren't here on our first episodes. We were talking about our championship predictions. But fifth place for Norris, that's you saying it. You've got the benefit of a few races now. But we'll come back on that at another point.
Yeah, so just give me half points, at the end.
That's a done deal. Perez, though, scuppered the entire race. I thought he looked like he had the pace, and it wasn't an Albon or Gasly of recent years where he was going to slide back and wasn't in there. He seemed once... I don't know why he struggled as much as he did to get past Norris. He did get there eventually, and he was complaining on the radio that Norris overtook off the track, which ultimately came to nothing because he overtook him. But once he was past, the gap more or less stayed pretty steady to the front runners. And if Perez hadn't lost that position to an opportunistic Lando, I do think Red Bull finally have two drivers capable of... I don't think Perez is at the Verstappen stage, but I think he's definitely at the Bottas, if not better than Bottas stage, where we've got two championship teams with two 1 and 2 drivers who can really have some tactical scupperings for each other. Verstappen was really by himself out front this time round, and they tried to back Perez into Hamilton briefly, didn't they? But it wasn't going to work out. But Thiemo, Perez, going to be still up there, going to be winning races this year?
Oh, I think definitely. I mean, as I was saying before, I think as long as he keeps building on the momentum that he had this weekend, whilst it might not have been the most exciting race for him, he did what he needed to do. He backed up his teammate a good amount, and it kind of reminds me of Vettel and Webber when they were teammates. You've got the one young fast gun, and you've got the older, more experienced driver being able to back him up and give him a good challenge every now and again to really push him and make sure that they can get the biggest amount of points available to them, which after having Gasly and Albon for the last couple of years or so is exactly what Red Bull needs to, at least, if they're not going to win the Drivers' Championship, then they can maybe get the Constructors' Championship, and I think they'll still be very happy with that if that's the way it goes.
Yeah, the championship points hugely beneficial for Red Bull to have two drivers up there, and that's not been what they've had for a very long time. So I'm really hopeful that as a championship, we could really see for the first time in years one of those, say Hamilton or Verstappen wins a championship and the other team wins the Constructors' Championship, which would be ace in some regards.
Hasn't happened for almost a decade, I think.
It's been a very, I think it's a
2008
2007 or 8 or so.
Yeah, 2008 was the last
Ferrari
time.
McLaren, I think, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, Hamilton Championship, Ferrari Constructors.
Yeah, that was that Spygate year.
Spygate was 2007, so the aftermath of Spygate when McLaren got whacked that £145 million fine.
Yeah, ouch, right, ouch. Talking of the stuff though, Perez, so he lasted 50 odd laps on those tyres, bless him, really, really left out to dry. And I can see why Red Bull did it, because the guy was so safe in fourth place. We mentioned Norris and McLaren just not having the pace to catch up on Red Bull. But what a boring race to poor Perez must have had, just in no man's land. Aside from Mazepin driving into him at one point, there was really little else for him to do.
Using team radio from him for that though, so at least that was something.
Yeah, there's something that came out of it. But yeah, the undercut seemed to be the only... Yeah, talk about strategy. The undercut seemed to be the only way that Verstappen got passed into P2, because came out one lap earlier. The warmer tyres then helped him blast past Bottas. Although we haven't actually mentioned the Hamilton pass on Bottas, I don't think, have we yet? That seemingly out of nowhere, I was just thinking, right, we're settling into this now, wait to the pit stops, and all of a sudden Hamilton's alongside thanks to that DRS pass.
We looked a bit too far back at the start, and they just decided, you know what, no, actually, I am going to overtake him with Bottas. I don't know whether or not whether he was thinking the same as everyone else, like, oh, he's not going to do it this lap, or what happened there, but Hamilton's like, no, all right, I'll go around the outside and do a lot quicker, and I'll take the lead while I'm at it. Bye. Yeah,
it was very reminiscent to the overtake last year as well. I'm sure Hamilton overtook Bottas last year, and it was almost like, carbon copy. And that DRS zone is, really powerful as well. Not as powerful as last year because they did shorten it down a bit, but certainly that DRS zone does aid overtaking for sure.
So when you're Lewis
Yeah,
Hamilton, it doesn't really matter if it's 120 metres shorter.
Oh, no way.
it's one of these double-edged swords, isn't it? That you want to see the overtaking, but you don't necessarily want to see the overtaking as easy as it could be with the long straight they've got. But Hamilton just used the DRS to get much closer, and then it was all his slight overspeed and a lot of skill to make it stick as he did. But I think Crofty or Brund, one of the commentators, did make mention of the fact that you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't, trying to defend those sorts of moves. I think it was Vettel on somebody earlier, Vettel and Ricciardo it was later on in the race, that if Vettel didn't defend, Ricciardo was going to go on the inside. If Vettel did defend, Ricciardo's going to go on the outside. There's nothing you can really do about it. But all in all, happy that they do have the DRS. If the other choice is to have an Abu Dhabi of last year and no overtaking. But yeah, it is. In the last laps, we ended up having all the people you want to be watching racing at the back. Schumacher, Latifi. Thiemo, we've not really seen much of Schumacher, but he showed decent racecraft. Not too surprising from what we saw last year. He's was never strong in quali in F2, but seemed to be not so bad when it came into the races. So he seemed to do some decent overtakes. He didn't win as much as his teammate last year, but he was always consistent, and he's showing a bit of that in F1, albeit at the back right now.
So I thought he was quite impressive this weekend, especially following his little bit of a shunt at Imola. But it should be noted that whilst it's also impressive that he got past Latifi in the car that he's in, because the Williams, as not great as it is, it's still better than the Haas. But I think you should also get a bit of commendation for him, because every time he got close to him, he then had to pull over because of blue flags to let someone through. So then you've got this big gap he's just been working so hard to get down, and then it's all back up again. So the fact that he was able to do that about 3 times and then still get past him, okay, Latifi made a mistake, but still, you've got to be there to capitalise on it. I think it's pretty good, and I think Nick will be quite happy with the fact that he actually was able to do some racing this weekend and do something. So it was great for him. And if he can have a bit more like that this season, I don't know if it's going to happen an awful lot more, but a few more races like that should keep him entertained. It'd be a good experience for him if he manages to get a better car underneath him next year.
Yeah, I think if he's Haas next year is, well, it can't be worse, can it? But he's showing that he's.
Don't say that.
He's. It's too early to say, yeah, but a lot of people could worry that he's only there because of his father's name, and it depends how you want to spin the argument. He is
better the name than the money that doesn't back up the talent. So
yes, and we know, of course, who you're speaking of there, Thiemo, but showing some real, talent. That's the right word for it. He was showing Jacob that Haas might not be the fastest, but Schumacher's earned his place to get into F1.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a worry coming into the season, although he did win the F2 championship. He didn't win it in convincing fashion, but, he had the consistency, which I'm sure Tino already mentioned. And, I was really, really surprised, although, we know that he's got the overtaking capabilities in F2 to get on the back of Latifi. The Williams is a bad car, we all know that, but it's nowhere near as bad, I'd say, as the Haas. So it was just really, really nice. And to be fair, that was one of my highlights of the race, actually, was Schumacher getting past Latifi. And I don't know if we're going to see it too many more times this season, but Schumacher certainly proved that he's a lot better than Mazepin this weekend, that's for sure.
Kind of reminds me of Russell in his first season, where he's just doing stuff at the back, but everyone's cheering for him that he gets up to 17th place, and just happy that there's something good coming for him. So
it was very reminiscent of that, to be fair.
I did feel when I was watching that, and it was exciting to see Schumacher, because it's kind of the first time we'd seen him be able to prove why he's in F1. But I did wonder if people would be so excited if we were watching Latifi get passed by Giovinazzi in exactly the same sort of moves. It's like, but it's just a move at the back. But seeing it, there's something about seeing the name Schumacher and seeing him in a car which isn't going to do anything this year, do something. It was great. Also at the back,
for me, it was a Haas overtaking a Williams was the big one for me.
Yeah, that's a good point. And sorry, Thiemo, you were going to say?
I would say a little bit reminiscent. It's not quite as bad as the car that they had in 2017, but like similar to Alonso in McLaren in the later years, where it's like, okay, the car's not great, but if you've got the right person in it, you can still get a decent little bit out of it. So it's that kind of thing for me there.
great for another segue there, Thiemo, because Alonso and Ricciardo both making up spaces as well, or making up places from the back. So I think we mentioned briefly before that Alonso was 13th to 8th, if I recall correctly, and we saw Ricciardo was 16th up to 9th. So Ricciardo, the one making the big jumps, but I'd expect the McLaren to make those jumps. I do think they're the third best car, maybe with the Ferrari at the moment. But Alonso, an Alpine, Ocon, very well on Saturday, we mentioned briefly, and he didn't really have to do much on Sunday to kind of keep that place because the midfield were battling amongst themselves. But yeah, Alonso and Ricciardo, guys, really showing a little bit of a midfield tightness in the scrapping that we're expected to see, Thiemo.
Yeah, Alonso just seems to have come alive a bit more this weekend. I don't know if it's a sign of things to come just yet, or if it was just a one-off thing before next time. But we'll be able to see that over the next couple of races. But he seemed quite hungry for it, and he was really passionate on the team radio about, okay, who's the next one we're going to get? Let's go for it. And his overtakes were just reminiscent of what you expect from him back in the old days. So I was quite happy to see that. And Ricciardo as well. Would have preferred to see him get a little bit higher, especially in that McLaren, but again, 16th to 9th, it's not too bad. You get a couple of points. Zach Brown seems happy with him, and again, he's struggling in qualifying, so I think best of a bad situation. Can't be too disappointed overall.
I don't know how. I was thinking this a little bit, that if Ricciardo really struggles all year, how much does it tarnish his reputation? But I think that guy's had too much of a strong career thus far to really worry about that. Or Thiemo, am I being a bit too generous for Ricciardo?
He's not quite at Vettel standards yet on that one, is he? So I mean, if Vettel had just had one duff year and then he bounced back immediately, we wouldn't be talking about it. Like, well, it happens, you know. But yeah, Ricciardo, new car, new team, trying to fit in with everything, and we know the car's there because Lando's doing so well on it, and we know that Daniel's got the race pace, and he's got all the necessary skills and tools to get everything from the car. He just needs a little bit more time, I think. It's a bit like Perez with Red Bull and then Alonso with the Alpine. It's just taking a little longer. I mean, you could say the same about Carlos Sainz in Ferrari. He had a very good qualifying and a decent race. It was just the tyres at the end that scuppered him, really. So it's kind of, I think, once we get past Monaco and maybe into Turkey, kind of that stage of the season, we should hopefully have everyone up to speed by then. But I think we're just in for a bit of a rough time, and maybe a bit of luck will come their way. Maybe Monaco will help him out a bit on clearing the field ahead for him a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. He's, of course, Ricciardo's done very well at Monaco in the past. Could have had 2 victories if things shook out slightly different.
Should I call it now the Monaco win for Ricciardo? Wow,
that would be quite the bet. But I'd love to see it in a McLaren. That would be something, wouldn't it? Yeah, and at the end of the race, we saw what turned into another qualifying session as everybody pitted into. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? The commentators make joke of it that it's a single point, and everybody could have said, this is going to be rubbish, what's the point of it? But the point, excuse the puns of the point, but the point of it is creating something at the end of this race where the end of the race had nothing else. If there wasn't a fastest lap point that these guys could have duelled for, I don't really know what we'd have got too excited about, save for Latifi and Schumacher. It was great. Perez first,
Bottas. I've ever seen anyone about a single championship point, but since they've introduced this, I mean, I don't know quite why. Great, we all have an extra point, but they're just getting a bit too into it.
See, the funny thing is, I was definitely on that opinion, and when Hamilton mentioned it, I remember in an interview when it was first introduced amongst a little bit of controversy, but what Hamilton said could have rung true, that if you got that point every single race, you more or less getting more points in second place and almost as many points as first place. So it's not insignificant. And we've briefly spoken about 2007, 2008 years, where 2007, the championship was decided by a point. It's 2008, the championship was decided by, I think, a point as well. That it doesn't seem like much now, but come the end of the season, it really could be huge.
I suppose it's a good motivation for someone like Hamilton as well, who's achieved so much already, but it's that extra bit to keep him like, okay, we know you can win the race, but can you get that extra point and beat them on another level? It's kind of, and it's another thing for Max and Valtteri then as well, a bit to see it's like, oh, can I take this point from, you might get the race, but I can get this little chink in his armor. If you can do that every race, like you say, it builds up to quite a nice stack of points. So
Yeah, I think you're right. Now, away from Formula One on the racetrack, we've got Formula One returning, similar to Portimão being introduced last year. We've got Turkey back this year as well. I'm really excited because I love Montreal as a Grand Prix. Driving it on the games or the simulators, I think it's fun. But I don't remember the last good or great Canadian Grand Prix, the one that
2011.
Well, 10 years ago, so that's a long
That's
time,
not a point.
right? And the only one I do remember, I think, was Ricciardo's first win, and that was by virtue of Rosberg and Hamilton having brake issues, from what I recall. That it's, yeah, I like it. I've been to the track. I think it's great, but I really think Turkey is, as it demonstrated last year, that's the sort of track which we know will be good. I don't remember particularly poor Turkish Grand Prix.
It's a double-edged sword of could have been a one-off last year that we got such a crazy race, but hopefully not. But again, we've had some good races there before in the past, and it's obviously last year not counting. We've had some good races there, so it should be interesting to see. It's a proper track, I think. So it'd be good fun to see going around there again and seeing what they can do with all their upgrades. Because again, I think it's definitely one of those seasons where there's going to be tracks that suit some teams better than others. So it'd be interesting to see if the Aston Martin does any better there after how well they did last year, because that would be the only, if there's a place to be consistent, that would be the place to do it. So it could shake up the midfield a bit, which would be fun.
And Aston Martin and pole at Istanbul Park. That's what Thiemo's saying, everybody. Everybody heard it. It's digitised now. Also, sprint races, or sprint qualifying, should I call them? Sprint race qualifying, to be completely correct. Good, bad. It's something, right? I'll be honest, I've wrote an article about this for the week, and my opinions on it, I'm happy for Formula One to try things. I really am. I think by itself, fine, 3 races. What can people really complain about too much? If it's awful, it's only 3 races and a 23 race possibly or probably calendar, depending on how COVID impacts further things. And it's the same for everybody. That was my argument, that it's not like maybe some of the tracks, if we spoke about this, Red Bull and Mercedes could be fighting each other, but it's not like, oh, they're doing these 3 races and that's going to really help Ferrari win the championship this year. It's fine. The negative that I've seen is it's like a filter, and I can agree with this. It's a filter for the race, that if you have somebody out of position like Ricciardo at this track from the qualifying, which will be on Fridays from now on, you put him from a sprint race and he will make his way further. So when it comes to the actual race, he's got less making up to do. So that's going to negate some of the fun on Sunday.
That is that you could then have a more boring race on a Sunday, because if there's less work to do, there's potentially less excitement. And I think the other big problem I have with it, because I mean, I like sprint races in F2 and F3. I think they're great for that. But I think the major problem I have with F1 is what you're there for the weekend for. As great as F2 and F3 are, you're not there to watch those as the main event. You're there to watch F1, and you love the build-up of the practice on the Friday, the qualifying on the Saturday, to try and eke all that tension out of it, so that when it gets to lights out on Sunday, you are just glued to the screen. Because, as you were saying earlier, what doesn't happen all the time, anything can happen. Whereas if you have a qualifying sprint race, whatever you want to call it, on the Saturday, I feel like it might take a little bit out of it, and you then maybe just get, it's kind of like the back-to-back races we had in Austria and Silverstone last year. You kind of know what to expect for the Sunday there, and it might take some of the excitement out of it. But I mean, I'm happy to watch and try it, but my bar is set low.
Yeah, see, for me, I will watch it. And my biggest complaint of it all is the Friday, that qualifying goes to Friday. I enjoy qualifying. I think qualifying is a worthwhile session. And there was a time when I was happy to miss it, or come in at Q3. But at the moment, especially we saw on Q1 at Portugal, qualifying is a session that's competitive, that you need to watch. It's the first time you actually see the true pace of the cars for the weekend, and therefore it's necessary viewing if you really wanted to watch the sport. So you move it to Friday, which for a lot of people, they'll be happy they're working from home, I presume. But for a lot of people who work a 9 to 5 where they can't work from home, you're going to miss out on a competitive session now. Arguably, you get a race now on Saturday, but you are missing out on qualifying, which is a key component of the weekend. And I do think that is a problem. And what I mentioned earlier about combining it with other news by itself, fine, but by itself just suggests as sprint race qualifying is what it is. Combining it with the Miami announcement, which was just preceding it, and I'm starting to think this is what Formula One's been trying to do for a long time, is turning their entire race weekend into a race weekend takeover of a city. And I've been to the Singapore Grand Prix, and I know what that felt like. Formula One took over the city for that weekend, and that's what I'm seeing with Miami now, that what they're trying to do is turn it into 3 days where you must watch something each of those days and go to a city. And we spoke last week about the Miami Grand Prix, likely circuit, not too exciting. Saudi Arabia is the same. Abu Dhabi minus a straight or two is the same. Oh, no, that's Abu Dhabi, sorry. Baku is the same, minus a straight or two. Abu Dhabi is pretty awful as well. But Formula One's going to these cities, takes over the city, Singapore being a perfect example, takes over the city, and if you're there, great, party atmosphere, it's a carnival. Formula One's this big festival that's coming there, you get music and live bands and all sorts of artist acts which aren't music. It's great, unless you're the people across the other 200 countries in the world that aren't hosting Formula One that weekend. And that's my concern when you join the two together. What does it mean for the wider implication? So what's the longer term implications for Formula One? Are we going to start having a calendar where half of the races are going to be Miami car park type races that have got sprint races, which are just severely awful to watch?
I feel like it's going a bit too much down the route of it's being entertainment with rather than what it should be, which is sport, which is entertaining. And I feel like this is them just trying to get more marketability out of it and just try and make it. So yeah, you've got some racing, but they've got all these other things going on as well that it seems like the racing is also there as well. It seems a bit like the Super Bowl. Like, you're there to watch a bit of football, but you're also, it's like you could come and take it and leave it, but you're not really paying too much attention. And if you're just a casual fan, you're there for the halftime show, you're there for the bits in between. You're not really there for the action as such, which fine for that, but that's not Formula One for me. So I feel like Formula One by itself is already the pinnacle of motorsport, and it shouldn't need that extra bit of something for people to already be there in the city over the weekend. It's not like there's no one going to watch these races when they're allowed, obviously. But I feel like there's other ways that they could be finding to make it more of an event, and I don't think it's necessarily by messing with the weekend schedule. It's qualifying's been, I mean, it's been going for forever, and I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with it. I mean, they tried that new qualifying format in 2016, and God, that was awful. And they went straight back to it. So yeah, but I think it's just, you're there for the Sunday. It's not like you can't have other events that are related to it without the motor racing aspect of it. So you could have, I don't know what you do, but have events with the drivers or behind the scenes stuff. But like, you've got to think that F1's employing enough people behind the scenes to think of something that doesn't involve messing with the formula that is already pretty solid on the whole. I mean, the rule changes for next year are meant to be there to make things more interesting on a Sunday and arguably on a Saturday, because if everyone's as close as is expected when things take off next year, then you don't need all of this taking over a city for a weekend, because everyone's already going to be there taking over the city because they don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah,
so it's we'll see what happens, but I'm not on board just yet.
Yeah, I'm very happy to have the three this weekend to see. Three-way this weekend. I'm very happy to have the three this season to see how they are, because we could be talking, and by the looks of it, it's going to be Silverstone, Monza, and Brazil. If they go to Brazil,
Rio,
we'll see.
So. Yeah.
Yeah, so if there is those three, we could be speaking after Silverstone in a couple of months and be thinking, wow, that was worth it, wasn't it? So I'm happy to be proven wrong. And I ended the article.
Then I feel like I'd be cautious of maybe it's just a one-off and then maybe judge it after all three of them rather than. But
that's true. That's true. That's very, very true. Yes, my thoughts on Portugal as a race circuit, or Portimão as a race circuit from last season, where it's great, and this season it's Spain, but slightly different. So yeah, who knows? A one-off, but. There was a quote which I will now completely butcher, which I've ended my article on about this, from somebody I saw on Reddit who said, as a Formula One fan, you will hate two things. One, you'll hate the current state of the sport, and two, you'll hate any proposed changes of the sport. And I thought it was the most astute observation of Formula One fans. So yeah, I want things to be better, but I don't want things to change. That's probably how it is. Let's wrap things up for now, as we have spoken F all for a long time, and anybody on the podcast might be thinking we have just completely ignored Jacob, but if you're listening, he has been disconnected. If you're watching, you're going to be seeing some weird editing because I've got rid of him slightly about 10 minutes ago, but he has been nice enough to provide us with his top three and bottom three drivers of the weekend. So I am going to bring them out for him now, and then Thiemo will go to you, and then I'll finish on my one. So Jacob's top three: Esteban Ocon, and I can believe that's going to be from Saturday rather than Sunday. Mick Schumacher, yeah, I can't disagree with that. And Norris, very, very solid. Bottom three from Jacob, Mazepin. He mentioned earlier in the chat as well that it might only be a bottom two because Mazepin could be an ever-present. Raikkonen and Latifi, so I think they're probably the three that were at the bottom of the actual standings at the end of the race classification. So I can't really argue on any of those. Thiemo, how about yourself? Top three?
Top three. Alonso's definitely in there because it was just nice to see him back. Norris as well, because again, he was just, hate to be a copycat or not, but he's just solidly proving himself and doing everything that he's doing and more there. So and then Checo, because he's had a rough couple of races and he's kind of seemed to have found his footing a bit. So it's just nice to see him bouncing back on that one. So hopefully I've not cursed him again.
No. Yeah, Checo's a weird one, isn't it? Because he had a decent race, had a very good race actually at Bahrain, but that problem before the race started really scuppered him, and of course he didn't even make it into Q3. And then Imola was a shocker for him. But yeah, it was solid.
He seems to be
Norris
finding his feet a bit now, so hopefully.
Yeah, it's early days. Like we said with Ricciardo, we're giving him a bit of leeway. We've been a new team. It should be the same for Perez as well. Bottom three, Thiemo?
Mazepin, because oh my days, you wouldn't have thought he would have been any worse after being 40 seconds behind last time, and then he's a minute behind Mick. A minute. It's just like, there's Mick overtaking a Williams, and it's like he's nearly a lap down without even being lapped at that point. So, and then it was, well-deserved 5-second penalty, but a bit amusing that they give him that as well, because it's going to make any difference to him. But amusing them and deserved. But and other two, I think, as we're saying, it's giving him a bit of leeway, but Ricciardo was a little bit disappointing, I think, because whilst it was a good progression, I feel like he could have got a couple more places, and Alonso seemed to just eclipse him out of nowhere on the overtake, so I thought that could have been a bit better there. And I don't want to be mean to Russell, because he did a decent job on a Saturday, but it seemed to be, as you were saying, it's just a race for survival rather than anything, which I was kind of hoping he'd be able to get his elbows out a bit more, so maybe Spain will be kinder to him. Yeah,
it's going to be Monaco where these Williams and Haas drivers are going to be hoping they can. That could be Russell's race, couldn't it? If he does well at Monaco,
you know which has to avoid in Monaco. There, you don't want to be anywhere near that one.
God, that track's tiny as well. It could be really, really fun. But yeah, Russell at Monaco could be a real good shout if he gets a P11 qualification again. I know we're skipping Spain here, as I'd like to do.
There he would only need to survive and stay where he is, because if there's one or two cars up ahead doing something, then it's just maybe I'll quietly get some points over here if I don't shout it loud enough.
Yeah, I think he'll end up, if that was to be replicated come Monaco, I do think Russell would end up being that gap, wouldn't he? It'd be like the trolley train of old, where somebody in P5 like Norris would be like, there's a massive gap. If you pit now, you'll get out just ahead of Norris, and there's in a 40-second gap before P9 or P10.
Latifi had a two pit stop gap back to last race, so with change.
Yeah, it's Haas and Williams are really going to have a tough old season. Nothing new there for Williams, but from Haas last year as well. But yeah, if either of those guys get points or 1 point, that could be worth millions. My top three, though. Top three, I had Hamilton, mainly because the guy didn't start at the start. Start from first place, should I say. And it was showing me with those two overtakes why he is the champion and he is hungry, and it kind of silenced any critics. The 30-second gap come the end totally flatters him because of the pit stops that nobody else wanted to take and for that fastest lap thing. And I would have loved to have seen him go in for the fastest lap point as well, just to put middle finger up to everybody else, just for the fun of it. I saw the interview, was it De Resta interviewing Verstappen after the race and telling him that he didn't get the fastest
He didn't
lap.
look too happy that he was being told that, does he?
I thought De Resta probably should get the driver of the day vote because asking or telling Max that, I thought he could have got a punch.
Takes some balls.
It does. It takes a real Scottish balls. Well done, Paul. Also, to echo a little bit of the rest of you guys, I've got Alonso as another winner for me. I did say Ricciardo did more positions, but Alonso's in an inferior car in my point of view. But it kind of goes out to Alonso and the Alpine team. Ocon could have got it, but Sunday, I don't know what more he could really have done, but Alonso...
There was just less for him to do, really, wasn't there?
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, if Hamilton starts in first and Bottas starts in 20th, and then Bottas finishes second, you can't say that Hamilton had a worse race because he didn't do any overtakes. So, yeah, it's what it is, and it just encourages to see Alpine. If we were doing it on a teams thing, I'd say Alpine was my second person, but I gave it to Alonso, and then third Norris for all of the above reasons that we've gone through with you two, and yeah, it's looking really solid. For my bottom three, Norris's teammate Ricciardo, just from the shocker of the qualifying. When you've got the car that's third best on the grid, arguably third best on the grid, ninth place isn't great. Poor qualifying or not, Ricciardo, I hope he does better because he's such a likeable guy, but he just wasn't really good enough, but I'm sure he'll bounce back. Mazepin, not just a minute, and I think there was a pit stop in there from what I vaguely remember, because I don't really concentrate too much on him, but half a second off of Mick, or off of the pace from the 19th place car in qualifying as well. Oof. That is bad. And his Perez incident too. Yeah, just there's no spins.
Stuff, but it's not like he's not known about these rules
flags,
before.
yeah.
So it's like, what do you think's going to happen there?
Yeah, it's racecraft entirely. But yeah, I don't think he's spun in the race this time, so that's slight progress. But yeah, he's pretty dire. And then Kimi. If you're right, Thiemo, which I'm guessing you are, because I didn't research too much, that he's checking something on the steering wheel and then hitting his teammate. That is, if that was Mazepin, the internet would be absolutely furious about it, right? It's you give a little leeway.
Kimi gets leeway for just being Kimi, really, doesn't he?
Exactly that. So yeah, I think it's inexcusable though. That's a race that could have. That's an incident that could have ruined both of the Alpha's races. In one very dangerous swoop going at 180, 200 miles an hour, hitting somebody. It could have been really, really, really bad. So yeah, Raikkonen gets it for me. But yeah, we've got 1 week to go, and we'll be talking F1 again with Spain, and Spain's also the start of the Formula 3 season, Thiemo. So finally got underway for Formula 3. Difficult to say, I guess, because it's a lot of rookies going in there, but anything we should be looking out for this weekend?
First race is in Spain, so again, it was for me the least exciting Formula 3 round last year, but it was still good enough in places. It'll be interesting to see what Arthur Leclerc can do now that he's going to be in there, and we've got a few other drivers that switching teams around a bit, and it's hard to say. I mean, you've got Correa coming back as well. So that'd be interesting to see. He's kind of obviously he was in F2 and now he's using F3 to reassess where he is before he potentially makes a step up to F2 next year. But there's I mean, at the end of the day, 30 cars, 30 drivers, and a couple of races on the weekend. It's going to be a bit of fun regardless, and it'd just be nice to have some more close racing. And some of the Red Bull Junior drivers look like they were quite hungry for it, which they've still got hope, bless them. So it'd be fun to see what happens there.
Yeah, I saw Jack Crawford on Instagram, one of the Red Bull Junior drivers, saying it was his 16th birthday, which is a terrifying thought to think how young these guys are. From in a positive way for Jack, but for me feeling a bit mortal, being more than double the kid's age. So yeah, that's a hell of a thought. But 3 races, it's very similar to Formula 2 in terms of different weekend structure, more races per weekend, fewer rounds, I believe it is. I know last year was a slightly different year with all of COVID affecting things. So, yeah, we'll be talking about that next week. Formula 3 starting again, 3 races. Formula 1 in Spain. Yeah, people say Spain is the race, you take the S away, and it is pain because of how poor some of the races can be. But hopefully Formula 3 can make up for it.
Red Bull to be quite strong there, so maybe we'll get something interesting there if Max doesn't quite capitalise on it. Maybe it's Checo's turn.
Well, if nothing happens, we can guarantee we'll be talking F-all about it here anyway. There might be F-all to talk about. But great time to say goodbye. So thank you, Thiemo. Thank you, Jacob, from earlier. Thiemo, if people want to find your motorsport thoughts this week, where can they look online for that?
You can find me on GP Grandstand, of course, and you can find me over on Drive Tribe. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, you can do at t.albers.daily.drivetribe.
Thank you very much. For myself, you can find my writing on gpgrandstand.com as well, and fortloc.com. For my satire F1 news, search for the F1 week that was on YouTube. And of course, I'm on the Grand Prix Grandstand TV YouTube channel, where you can hear me interviewing drivers and talking F1. Thank you everybody for listening to us talk about F1 once again. Keep your ears peeled for the next episode, where you'll hear us talking F1 about Spain.